Do you have ancestors that served in the British military? Are you trying to figure it out? Well, I've got the man here that can help you. We're going to talk today about things you need to be cautious of, things that you might want to look for to know whether or not you do, and then if you do, places to go to get all those answers. So I'm so happy to have you here, Paul. Thank you so much. This is Paul Nixon. He's the Director of Historic Records, and he also has a very special interest in British military records, so he's the man to talk to. And you know what, a lot of times you guys complain that I don't do anything outside of the US, which I know is kind of true because that's me, but he is going to solve this for us today, so thank you so much.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. So tell me a little bit more, because I know I have people watching from all over the world, really, whether they be in the US, Australia, or in the UK. How do you know if one of your ancestors has served in the military? What are some signals?
Well, let's talk about the First World War, because that was a war that affected the entire population, certainly in Britain and other nations as well, of course. And you had such a lot of men who volunteered for the colours to join up to the army. There was the call by Kitchener who wanted men to enlist. And so the likelihood is that if you've got British ancestry who were alive at that time, maybe men born between 1880 and 1900, or maybe 1875, 1900, the chances are that they could have served in the British military. So that's a good sign, because men volunteered and later they were conscripted as well.
Okay.
So that's a good place to start. And really, when you're looking at records for the military, the First World War and earlier is where you'll find the most chances of success, because many of those records have been published online. It becomes more difficult for Second World War because a lot of those records are still closed. Ancestry is currently digitising service records in partnership with the National Archives, and they're publishing those online. So those records are really exciting if you have people who served in the Second World War. But of course, you know, there's no substitute for speaking to your family about it. You know, what did Granddad do? What did Great Granddad do? And getting that information first of all. You'll often find families have photos of men in uniform. Mm-hmm. So you then start there and then go backwards. But if you have an inkling that your ancestor served in the First World War, and it could be women as well, lots of women served also, it wasn't just men, you can find details about them on sites like Ancestry, like Find My Past, FamilySearch, My Heritage. You'll find them on all those sites.
What are some of the things, like in the United States, on our census records, sometimes they were asked if they had served in the military, and that can be a big clue. Mm-hmm. Not on all of the US Census records, but on some of them. Is there anything like that in the UK as well that would direct people to that, or not so much?
Not on census returns and the like, no. Although you might find marriage certificates during periods of conflict where it gives the man's profession as a soldier. So you could find he's a private in the Essex Regiment or similar. You'll also find sometimes on the 1939 register, which was published in England, some men put previous service experience on there. So one man I researched who lost his leg in the First World War, he wrote on the 39 census that he was a disabled veteran, and he gave his regimental number in the regiment. So those are all helpful clues as well.
If you had that inkling that you do have somebody that served, what's your next step? What do you do? How do you figure it out?
Well, it's so easy now. I mean, I started doing this in 1980 when there was no internet. You had to go to archives and second guess things.
I started in '82.
yeah. So we're similar, but
yeah.
I guess with the main sites, the big sites, Ancestry, Find My Past, you can first of all search the military category. So put your ancestor's name into a search in the military category. If you know other information about a regiment or a number, you can put that on as well. But if you don't know that sort of information, and many people wouldn't do, start with a name. Obviously, as with all family history, the more unusual the name, the more chance of success.
Right.
So John Smith, you can have lots of results, But there's one example I used to use at my former company. The man's name was Vernon Swatsman, which is a really unusual name, and you just key his name in an all records search, and you get loads of results for him, including military papers as well. So that's, I guess that's the way to start. But again, look at artifacts, look at postcards. If you've got medals that were issued to your ancestor, medals before the First World War have the man's details impressed around the edges. So you get the name, you get the rank, you get the regimental number. If he was not an officer, if he was an officer, you just get the name and the regiment. So that's a great clue, because then you can put that information into the websites.
So you mentioned earlier records, like earlier wars. What other conflicts might you find people that served, and what are some of the clues other than, because when we go back farther into time, right, we don't always have those photographs, we don't have the recollections unless it's written up in some sort of family history. What are some of the conflicts that you might find your ancestors serving within, or just other times that people were called up? Because at one point, right, the UK was sending military men all over the world. What are some of the clues that you might find as you're way further back in time, early 1800s, maybe mid 1800s?
Well, I mean, thankfully, a lot of records were destroyed in the Second World War during German bombing, but thankfully, enough records survive still that you could still find papers for men who served in the army before 1914. So there's a series called WO97. WO stands for War Office.
Okay.
That's a National Archives reference. Find My Past certainly indexed those records. They published the images in conjunction with the National Archives. They also published records from WO96, which are militia records, so you'll find those as well. So those go right back to 1760.
All right.
So you can stand a good chance there potentially of finding ancestors. So there's all been indexed. Click on the link, click on the index, and you go to the records.
And that's Find My Past to grab
That's
right?
Find My Past.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they're on Ancestry as well. They may well be on Ancestry. The good thing about search on Find My Past is you can just key in one or two numbers, regimental numbers, and then put an asterisk, like do a wildcard search. And I think it's still the best search around, actually, if you're looking for ancestors. That wildcard search is
wait,
terrific.
let me slow you down.
Yeah.
So a lot of people may not know, and you went quick on that, and I'm not even sure because I'm not as familiar with Find My Past. I've used it, but not as much as I've used other sites.
Yeah.
So if you're searching for somebody like that, can you explain that search process again?
I guess in some instances less is more. So you don't want to put in too much information because then the search engine is looking very specifically at what you're putting in. But there's a wildcard facility search on Find My Past, and for that matter, it might have been introduced onto other sites as well. But I know for a fact, because I used to work there for many years, that you put a wildcard in. So let's say you're Aimee. If you typed in AI and a wildcard, an asterisk, it would come up with all the results for names beginning with AI. So you'll have Aimee and Aisha and whatever, all the names. But you can also do that for other fields as well. So you could search on a regimental number. If you're not sure what your ancestor's number was, let's say you just type in 12 asterisk and you'll get all the regimental numbers beginning with 12.
Whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So that's.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a really good tip.
That's very useful, and you can also use it to fast track your research as well. So there might be multiple ways that a regiment could be spelt. Often you'll find this. There's obviously only one way that regiment should be spelt, but you'll often find it's different spellings. So I always use the example of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, which is a very long name, Scottish regiment. But if you don't want to type all that, you can just type asterisk, wildcard, ARG, asterisk, and it will bring up all the results with Argyll. And Argyll is often spelt ARGYLE or ARGYLL, which is the correct spelling. But if you just do that shortcut, then you'll get all the results. So that's a good tip.
Those are good.
And that can really speed your research up.
Anything else we need to know when we're researching pre-World War I then?
Well, I think what I would say is that as good as all the sites are, there are still plenty of records that have not been digitized.
Yeah.
So, for instance, up till about 1900, you have what's called muster rolls and pay lists. So these are records of men serving in a particular regiment or unit, and the records were kept for pay purposes. So it records all the men's names, it records where they were stationed, it records their ranks, and those are recorded in muster rolls and pay books, which have been since bound into multiple volumes. And you'll find those on at the National Archives in London.
Okay.
So if you can't find a record of your servicemen, then you should look at the National Archives potentially as well, because they have pretty thorough collections of muster rolls and pay lists.
That's great. Okay.
There's another good tip that you could use to try and work out when your ancestor joined up. When a soldier joined the army, he was given a regimental number, and those regimental numbers were issued sequentially. So in 1881, the whole system of regimental regimental names changed. So pre-July 1881, you had the 1st Regiment of Foot and the 2nd Regiment of Foot and the 3rd Regiment of Foot. In 1881, those regimental names changed. So the 1st Regiment of Foot became the Royal Scots, the 2nd Regiment of Foot became the Buffs, the East Kent, the Royal West Surrey, the 3rd became the Buffs, etc. So they all had different names. But when men joined the army from July 1881, they were issued with a regimental number. So the first man in the queue would be given number 1. So let's say I'm the first man, I get number 1, you're behind me in the queue, and you get issued number 2.
Right.
And so it went on until it got to a point 9999,
Right.
and then it started again. Broadly, that's how it worked. So one of my blogs, the British Army Service Numbers blog, lists when those numbers were issued. So if your ancestor was number 1234, if you went to the blog, you could see that number 1000 joined at this date and number 2000 joined on this date, and therefore your ancestor must have joined between those dates.
Oh, that's so helpful.
So that's the logic of that.
Okay, I'm going to put that blog in the video description below, so you can find that and go straight to that blog if you'd like to.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
And that covers all the regiments. That covers the infantry, the cavalry, possibly some artillery as well. But the blog also gives details about prisoners of war as well, men who were captured in the First World War. On that front, there's another website you could check, which is the ICRC website, International Committee of the Red Cross. They have published records of prisoners of war, and there's around 12 million records in total for that, which you'll find on there. It's not been indexed, but you can find the information on there.
Okay, so but you're going to have to do a manual search then without the indexing.
You have to do a manual search, but it's broadly indexed, so you can search by name, by surname, and then by initial and regiment. So it's not it's not beyond possibility to find it. Some searches are difficult, but have a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gosh, I feel like I'm learning so much.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to say is that apart from the wealth of material published online on commercial websites and FamilySearch, of course, you'll also find really helpful information on some of the forums online. So the forum for the First World War is called the Great War Forum, and you'll find information on there. There's also a website called the Long Long Trail, which also covers the First World War, which is full of information, very useful information about regiments and men. Places like Facebook as well have groups. You'll find groups of interest for First World War, Second World War, and earlier. There's the Victorian Wars forum. So there's a lot of information online. For the Second World War, there's a website called WW2 Talk, and that's a really useful. Really useful website for information. So you can find that. You can interact with people. What else? If you're looking for information, looking for your lost medals of your ancestor, if you know his number, know his regiment, go to eBay, put a search in on eBay, just keep that search there. Medals do turn up. I collect medals myself, and I've managed to reunite 2 groups by just doing that, putting in a number, putting in a name, seeing a medal for sale, and then buying it and adding it to the collection. So it does work. But for that matter, you might never be successful, but the chances are against you. Another site of mine called BritishArmyAncestors.co.uk that has photos of soldiers. So what I did was license data from people like the National Archives, Find My Past, and others. There are 12 million searchable records on there, and the idea is you go there and you can just look for a photo of your ancestor, or you can upload a photo of your ancestor as well. So,
wonderful. I love that. Okay, I'm going to put links to all of these things as he's mentioned in the description.
So the best websites for searching for ancestors, in my opinion, would be Ancestry foremost, I think, just for the wealth of the records they have there.
Okay.
The original images, so you have original images. Ancestry and Fold 3. I mean, you have to think of Fold 3 in the same breath, because a lot of records from British military, which would normally have been published on Ancestry, are now being published on Fold 3. So you'll find pension records on Fold 3, pension records for the First World War, which for the consumer is a bit of a nuisance, because it means you have to have 2 subscriptions, or you just have to take advantage of the times when the sites are offering free deals. But in terms of the wealth of digitized material, images, Ancestry is definitely the best. So you have the pension cards. I'm talking of Ancestry and Fold 3 in the same breath here, but pension cards, medal index cards, medal rolls, Army Effects registers, so soldiers who died, details of them in the Army Effects registers. Find My Past has service records, as does Ancestry, but the search is better on Find My Past than it is on Ancestry.
Okay,
so,
that's good to know.
Because it has that wildcard option. And also there are different indexes, so whilst you may not find somebody on Ancestry, you might find them on Find My Past.
And vice versa. I know that's true.
And vice versa, but I think for the service records, you probably stand more chance on Find My Past because they indexed far more records than Ancestry did. So that whole series is a difficult series because it's burnt records, and you're taking information from what was originally microfilm, so it's black and white. the originals are too fragile to be digitized for a second time. But within those collections, which are broadly alphabetical, you'll often find little slips of paper in there which has names on, or a fragment of a name. Find My Past indexed all of those.
Oh, that's great.
Whereas Ancestry didn't. So
oh, that's good to know.
So you'll find.
Okay.
I forget how many names there were now. It's been a while since I've worked there, but I think around 300,000. I mean, it's quite a lot.
Wow.
Quite a lot of names. But it might just be a fragment. Usually it's just a fragment. But on occasions you might find your ancestor was a witness at a court martial, or there's something about him, admission to a hospital, things like that. MH106 is a series we should also mention, which is men admitted to hospitals in the First World War. So there are registers, admission registers for men admitted as a result of wounds or sickness. Okay. That collection was incomplete. National Archives retained a small sample and then destroyed the rest. Rather, National Archives wouldn't have done that, I should say. It's the Ministry of Defence that did that.
Okay.
So they saved a small sample. I know. Oh dear,
I know. It just hurts when you hear something like that.
I know it does. It's not the only sample either. There's I think PIN 26, which is widows' pensions. That's a similar example where they just destroyed the bulk of them. Yeah. So it's just luck of the draw. My grandfather and his 4 brothers all served in the First World War, and his records don't survive. His brother Edgar served in the Royal Flying Corps, and those Royal Flying Corps records exist on Find My Past, and I don't think they're on Ancestry. His other brother Sid, no records for him. Alf, who I met and interviewed, no records for him. But Jack, the only one of the 5 who was killed, actually, his records do survive. So, so you've got I had a 1 in 5, or 2 in 5 chance actually of getting my ancestors' records. So that's not bad odds actually, and you will find for some regiments, like the London Regiment, for instance, out from memory, 25th London Regiment, lots of records for them. You can almost guarantee that you'll find it. For others, Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry, Devonshire Regiment, not so many. And I'm not sure why that is. Whether it's because where they were stored in the warehouse when the bombs hit and the fire took hold, I don't know.
Could be,
but I think it probably is that. I would imagine the records would have been stored regimentally in regimental precedence order. So I mentioned earlier the 1st Regiment of Foot.
Right.
You'll see in all lists of any kind that the regiments are always maintained in that order. So they're known as Pontius Pilate's bodyguard because it's the 1st regiment, the oldest regiment. Yeah. So that's their nickname, the Royal Scots. And then you had the Queen's Royal West Surrey, and then the Buffs, and then the Royal Lancaster. They're always in those same orders, and that's how they would have been stored. So, if the bombs hit with number 53 in order, then tough. You stand. But it's remarkable that even so many did survive. Many are in charred condition, burnt condition. But there's still fragments there that are useful.
What are some of the things that you find in these military records besides being able to find out what regiment they were in, and then doing research on the regiment and learning more about their military service and their life in the military? What are some other genealogically relevant information that maybe help you extend your family tree that you might find in some of these military records?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's all sorts. The British Army loved paperwork, and you'll find loads of paperwork, for some. But, for I can't think of the full number now, but for Jack Nixon, my great uncle, he died, as I say, he was killed in action in 1918, about 6 weeks before the armistice, so it was really unfortunate that he didn't make it. But one of the papers in there, which you'll often find in records, is a list of all his surviving relatives. So you get the father's name, the mother's name, then you get the full blood brothers, the full blood sisters, half blood brothers, half blood sisters, and it gives them it gives the name, the age, and where they were living at the time. So for Jack, I've got.
Wow.
I mean, I knew all the details of his siblings and parents, but you get the addresses there as well where they were all living. So that's really useful. You'll often get letters as well written. Sometimes letters written after the war, where people are inquiring about pensions and the like. I've talked a lot about records that you find on these websites for soldiers. The officers' records haven't been digitised. They're still at the National Archives.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
The First World War officers are still there.
Can you place an order with the National Archives and have them research something for you like you can in the US, or is that not something that you can do? I don't know.
I don't know so much these days.
You need somebody to go in for you, hire a researcher to go into the archives for you and pull it?
Possible, yeah. I mean, you should check the National Archives website. I've not had to do that because Luckily,
You're there.
well, I live quite close. I'm close enough, to be
Yeah.
honest. Although having said that, I've not been there for a while to do that sort of research. But it's easy enough to do. You can find the index to soldiers, to officers on Find My Past.
Okay.
They're in two series. One is series W0339, and the next one is W0374.
Okay.
So those are officers who served in the First World War. Some were territorial regiment officers and others were not, regular army. But if you find a reference to one of those men, you know for sure that there's records
There's
at the National
more,
Archives.
and they
So-
need to get them.
Yeah, so you can either go there yourself, or you can. I don't know that National Archives provides that service now, but it's worth checking. But if they don't, they do publish a list of recommended researchers, so you could contact one of those people. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I don't know about you, but I've learned a ton, and I'm so excited about this because I do have some family members that I might find in some of these military records, and I honestly have never even tried, and you have encouraged me to do so.
Good stuff.
So
Okay,
thank
that's
you
great.
so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. I hope you all have a great day and good luck on your search. Take care.
Thanks.